Hello, this is Noah Taubleib, also known as That Sound Design Guy, and I'm here with Pete Lepley, score award-winning musician, composer for multiple games and films. And I can't think of a better starting question than just asking, can you tell us about some of the games and films you've composed for as a Score of the Year nominee?
Yeah, so Wargroove was a big one that I did somewhat recently. The last like really big one. I've done a few smaller mobile things since then, and I did Skyrogue before that. Kind of got my start, cut my teeth with Project M, which was a modded version of Super Smash Bros. Brawl that made the tournament circuits, and yeah, those are the notable ones. Working on Eternal Life of Goldman right now.
Okay. Um, and which was the game that got you the Score of the Year nomination? Was it Wargrove?
Yep, that was Wargroove.
That would explain it. Also, I'm just curious, while working on Project M, did you ever play it? And if so, who did you
Oh
main?
yeah, dude, I loved Project M. I really liked Wario in that one. I liked they brought back a lot of his Wario Land kind of feel.
Yeah, like the shoulder
Um,
tackle.
mhm. And I really liked Ganon. And man, it's been a while since I played. Samus had some really cool updates. I really liked being able to switch between Plasma and Ice Beam. Yeah, there was a lot of good characters. Really, pretty much everyone was fun to play.
Right. And were you involved at all with Project Plus, which came out a few years later?
I wasn't, no, but a guy, Rick, I can't remember his last name, messaged me about kind of a spiritual successor for Project M and was wondering if I would want to do some original theming for it. Unfortunately, I haven't had the time to get to it yet, but I would love to write an original theme for that as well,
Oh, and I'd love to be kept in the loop when you do.
for
Is
sure.
that Anyway, so next thing I'd like to ask is, how did you get your start as a composer? And are you primarily a music composer, or do you also handle things like sound design, audio implementation? Because I find, depending on who you ask, an audio person may wear multiple hats.
I haven't done very much sound design. I have done some. Actually did a Game and Watch sound effect in Project M, um, and then some other things here and there. But I do primarily composition and mixing and production work as well. I just did some work for a show that'll be out on Disney Plus, doing some additional production, and that was a lot of fun. So that's kind of moving toward being a bigger piece of my skill set and what I do.
Interesting. And like, what was your inspiration to get into music composition as a whole?
Video games. Growing up with game soundtracks that were just really inspiring. I remember playing like Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure on Windows 95 with um, there were several versions of that soundtrack, but the Windows 95 one was just incredible. The production quality and like the um, motivic reusage and the way that the themes develop across the score was super fun to listen to, and coupled with the visuals of the game, like I think that's kind of the game that really hooked me on game soundtrack composition.
Interesting. For me, it was Pokemon Emerald and Mega Man Zero 3 for the Game Boy Advance.
Also really good games. Yeah.
Um, Next is just a fun little tech question. What is your DAW of choice, and which plugins would you say you use most often?
FL Studio is what I use. Serum, obviously,
Right.
and then lots of contact stuff for the orchestral writing. I have a lot of 8DO stuff that I end up using for orchestral string writing. Trying to think, there's just such a smattering of contact stuff that it's hard to point to any single thing. But yeah, contact and serum are probably my most used sampler and synth.
Got it. I heard contact because I have contact 7, but I think they're on Contact 8 now. Is that correct?
I think I'm still on 5, so I've
Oh
got some
wow.
catching up to do.
And I'm just curious, as a Contact user, do you enjoy have you used any of the stuff from Impact Soundworks like Super Audio
Oh yeah.
Cart?
I haven't used Super Audio Cart specifically, but I got Juggernaut when they were coming out with that,
Oh,
and
I
a
love the
handful of
Shreddage
other
series.
things. So good, yeah. Yeah, they do great stuff, and um, I do use a bunch of their sample libraries from time to time.
They just put out a really cool reverb plugin called Game Verb. It emulates the
I
reverb
saw
from
that.
Super Nintendo to Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1, even the reverb based on specific games, which is
Hmm.
interesting because I'm not sure. I don't think reverb can be copyrighted, can it?
I don't know. I don't think so, but maybe if you somehow, rip the mathematics that it's using to produce the sounds that you're getting. I'm not really sure,
I
but that would strike me as kind of odd if you could.
I guess just interesting. The last talk I did was with a YouTuber called Sound Font Guy, and his whole
Yep, he's
explanation.
awesome.
Oh yeah. Oh, perfect. Cool. You already know him. Then you might have seen his video breaking down the legality of straight out sound font rips from games and how that's
I
can
haven't
be
seen it.
legally. Oh, the crux is
Yeah, I know.
that it's legally dubious.
Fair enough. Um, yeah, I don't know the guy personally, but I just bought some of his Final Fantasy Tactics inspired sound fonts. Um, because that's another game soundtrack that is super near and dear to me. And just having those sounds is um, knowing that I can put together a Final Fantasy Tactics inspired piece whenever I want to is pretty cool.
Right. Oh, and what sound font plugin do you use? I'm partial to TX16X, or sorry, it's TW16X, I think. But I know a lot of people
Um,
like S for Zando.
FL Studio has a default one that's just fruity sound font player, and
Oh, okay.
that's what I use most of the time. And they didn't have a 64-bit version of it until fairly recently, so they
Oh.
just got that in I think version 20, maybe 21. So that's been nice to have too.
Now that I actually remember the talk I had with Sound Font Guy, I think he uses FL Studio as well. So maybe there's a running
Nice.
theme with people who are really into sound fonts.
Could be.
Right. Also, I don't know if you saw he recently did a Final Fantasy Tactics Advance sound font. I
Okay, nice.
haven't dived too deep into that one yet. The last one I really dived deep to was the his Metal Gear Solid 1 sound font. I actually made a little song based on it.
Nice. I actually saw that just today.
Oh,
It's a great piece.
oh, thank you. That's very nice of you to
Hmm.
say. And also that kind of actually leads to a question. In the video I did, I used a MIDI visualizer called Keysight. Now there are a lot of those kind of programs out there. There's Piano VFX. There's the old synth. You've seen the Synthesia stuff, I'm sure.
Hmm.
And because I
Yeah,
know
of
you,
course.
because I know you have a YouTube channel, and I presume a lot of your music is built with MIDI data. Is that something you would ever consider using to showcase music in the future, or kind of just an okay idea?
I've never really thought about it, but yeah, I don't see why not. I'm not really much of a piano player personally, so I wouldn't be able to put together a competent arrangement in that regard. But I don't see why not if it's just showcasing the MIDI data that's being played.
Oh yeah, like I mean, you can use it to, record yourself playing piano with your hands and
Hmm.
having the visuals on top of that. But what I did
Right.
for a series of videos I edited, I actually just through the MIDI data I was just able to export out of my project into Keysight, the MIDI visualizer of my choice, and it did that for me. I didn't even have to
Cool.
have hand playing,
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good idea, and the more visuals, the better. It seems like when you're uploading for YouTube.
of course. So getting back on topic with some of your game work, you've managed to make some very notable connections with game companies like PUBG Corporation, Chucklefish. What was your strategy for networking?
So I have an agent who is based out of Australia, and he does a great job of connecting me with a lot of those folks. But with Chucklefish, I actually messaged them about some of the artwork gifs that I'd seen them post on Twitter, and I reached out to them and asked if I could put together a demo. And it turns out that they were big fans of the of Project M and liked the music that I'd done for it. So I think a combination of uh, right place, right time, and having done the previous gigs to give me a bit of credence, I guess, behind what I was doing.
Right. And also, you're the first person I've spoken. Actually, sorry, you're not the first person I've spoken to who has an agent. There was also Enonzer, but
Mhm.
this is the first time I've thought to ask this question. Um, at what point did you get your agent? Was that like before you did any pro jobs, you made sure to get an agent, or did you have like a certain amount of success and then decided an agent was a good investment?
So that again was kind of a right place, right time sort of situation. And I'd already done the Project M theme at that point, but what caught his attention was a piece off of a St. Patrick's Day themed chiptune compilation album. Um, so like I said, again, right place, right time, and just putting yourself out there and um, doing stuff for people to chance upon.
Okay.
So I ended up getting an agent pretty by chance, but it's worked out really well.
Just interesting to hear how he came to you.
Hmm.
All right. And next thing I'd like to ask is based on your career and YouTube channel, I mean, we already talked about how you were inspired by video game soundtracks. Um, and so aside from the one you had mentioned previously, were there any other favorites? I mean, I know you've made a concept album on Metroid, you've done remixes of Donkey Kong Country 2. Just any other fun ones you want to point out?
So many, too many. I'm sure if I try to list some, I'll miss a bunch of them. But um, Final Fantasy Tactics again, really important special soundtrack to me. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, Final Fantasy VIII. While we're on the Final Fantasies, those are also both soundtracks that I enjoy a lot. Anything Armored Core, especially the third gen games, and the Armored Core 6, the latest generation, has had some really good music. Uh, Tekken 3, 7, 8 all have awesome music. Um, Zelda, Metroid, obviously. Um, Fantasy Star Online. Yeah, there's all kinds of them. There's no shortage of good game soundtracks out there.
Right. And so it's just funny that you mentioned Armored Core. I played the first one recently, like the original Armored
Nice.
Core on PS1.
Hmm.
And I guess in terms of sounds from like I'm kind of obsessed with the PlayStation era of music, the stuff that was like reliant on Roland and
Hmm.
Korg. I love the Roland and Korg plugins. I There's one YouTube channel called The Greatest Darn who does covers based on the PlayStation Mega Man X games. Like I'm just kind of obsessed with
Nice.
that era of audio a lot. That
I'm
like
right there with you right now. Yeah.
and I guess Sound Font Guy is too, considering he built the service off it.
Right.
Oh, also, and I guess for Final Fantasy, I was a 15 fan. I know
Okay.
make of that what you will.
I I haven't played most of the later, especially the mainline games, but uh, 8 was like one that I grew up with. I know most people don't like it, but I think the soundtrack is some of Nobuo's best work. Um, Liberi Fatale, the opening theme is just so good.
Yeah, I think I've heard that's like the epic orchestral.
Hmm.
Yeah, like
Yep.
yeah,
It's
that's the one.
very like Star Wars Episode 1 because that was kind of the era, I guess.
Right. Well, what came first, Final Fantasy VIII or Star Wars: The Phantom Menace?
I think it was Final Fantasy 8, but don't quote me on that. I'm not actually sure.
You have been recorded saying that, so
Well,
anyway,
thanks.
so
Cut that part out. No, I'm just kidding.
fair enough. So on your YouTube channel, you've made multiple video game arrangements and pieces like the aforementioned Metroid-based your Metroid Fusion and also your Sentinel albums. Did you have any particular motivations for starting a YouTube channel?
Um, I guess just trying to figure out what the best platforms are to get your music out there and what the best way to utilize them is. I haven't given YouTube a whole lot of attention lately, which is kind of too bad. But over the years, it's been SoundCloud, it's been obviously YouTube, Spotify, been all kinds of different platforms that take a degree of expertise to get the most out of them. With YouTube, just the algorithm, it seems like it changes so much that it's hard to figure out the best way to utilize it. But the the um my reasons for going there essentially boil down to getting my music out there and hoping that people enjoy it if they stumble on it.
Makes sense. Would you say platforms like SoundCloud are more consistent with their algorithm with the kind of content that succeeds?
Yes, but I think people have kind of left the platform. Like SoundCloud's not really doing nearly as much as it was before. I think there was a real kind of community centered around it, maybe like ten years ago. And I think people have kind of gradually sort of filtered toward your Spotify and um, platforms like that. But I kind of came up in the overclocked remix community, and SoundCloud was like booming at that point, and yeah, I think people kind of moved away from it at this point.
Right. And I guess Twitter at least got you a pretty good connection, so there's got to be,
True,
which is the nicest thing I've heard about Twitter so far.
uh, might be the nicest thing I have to say about Twitter.
Oh,
I think every platform has its uses. It can just be kind of a trick to figure out how to get the most out of it.
that's fair. Like the platforms I focus the most on are usually TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Like TikTok, I usually do sort of a tutorial kind of content. LinkedIn, these interviews, which I also post to YouTube, and then YouTube's usually where I showcase stuff like the aforementioned mini visualizer song I wrote.
Hmm.
I do a lot of sound redesigns like the Xbox and Sega consoles. I'm working on some of the
Nice,
Nintendo ones right now.
cool.
Uh, so I guess like I like YouTube for like projects.
Hmm. Yeah, I think YouTube is a good place to showcase like your full um, repertoire. And again, the visual element is so important that coming up with just making a video is a skill to itself.
Right.
So
Right. Because what I see a lot, even with artists who make really good music, is that they'll just post a static image of their cover album with the song running under it, and it gets like even if it's a really good song, it's like 3 views because like
yeah,
it needs that visual component, whatever it
it's
is.
true. Yep, I definitely agree.
Right. All right. So now for the big series of questions I've been looking forward to asking about. So you have a service where you sell music and sound presets for the audio plugin Serum. We've talked about how you've made one for Metroid Prime. You've also made one for just retro consoles themed in general, cyber guitars,
Hmm.
and you sell them at peteleplayGumroad.com. So a few questions. Starting off, can you just briefly explain what Serum is and how and why you use it to develop and how you use it to develop content?
Sure. Serum is kind of one of the industry standard synths right now. Um, it's got a surprising amount of depth. There's so many different things you can do with it, and there's a lot of freedom in creation. It is a wavetable synth, which means that there's in the oscillators you can load up basically instead of just a single waveform, you have 256 waveforms that you can scroll through. And what ends up happening with that is like it's kind of a you render out a little audio file, and then it turns into giving you like a snapshot of what is going on at that audio file in like one specific in time. Um, I kind of just I sometimes I'll hear a sound that I want to make and I'll try and replicate it. Sometimes I'll have a soundtrack in mind that I want to replicate the vibe of, like with the Metroid Prime soundtrack. Sometimes it was like um, making something that was just loosely and maybe not loosely, but inspired by the game's overall audio aesthetic. And sometimes I was trying to recreate a specific instrument that I heard in the soundtrack. Um, yeah, it's a really powerful synth, and I end up making a lot of my own wavetables for it as well. So there'll be instances where sometimes I'll resample like a piece of a chime hit or a little piece of a um, legato string line or something like that, and then turn it into a wavetable and work with it from there. I think I did that with there's like a kind of a chime pad in the Metroid Prime Serum Bank that's really thoroughly inspired by one of the specific sounds from the Metroid Prime 2 soundtrack. And I think I did end up sampling a chime hit and using that as the wavetable.
And I remember looking at the intro remix you made with your Prime, the intro of Metroid Prime 2 with your serum patch. And I loved it so much that it actually inspired me to, well, not only purchase it, by the way, for anyone who's watching, this is not sponsored. I so just want to get that out there. But because I actually used some of the cyber guitar sounds from your Prime patch and from your the aforementioned actual cyber guitars in a
Hmm.
documentary I did called Pay Dirt Story of Supercross, or a documentary I contributed some music to.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I remember you saying that over email. That's super, super cool. I'm really glad you got some good use out of them.
Oh, highly recommend. I also thank you for you were the one who actually introduced me to Serum, which I've gotten a lot of use out of since then.
Nice. Hmm.
I don't quite, I'm not quite at the level of your expertise where I can customize my own patches. And if you ever do have time for more YouTube stuff, I would actually love if you would ever interested in making like a tutorial on like how to make your own serum patch, I'd watch it.
I've heard that from several people now, and that is something that I've definitely been considering is actually a whole series of courses on synthesis and serum specifically within that umbrella, since that's kind of the my synth of choice right now. So I would
Uh,
love to do that, but again, like um, there's a lot of scripting and video
right.
creation on its own. I gotta have time to sink into it. So maybe once I have a little bit of a breather, I can get started on that.
Understandable. Just know that the demand is there.
Cool. Yeah, that's really good to know. Thanks.
Of course. The next question in this in the next thing I'd like to ask you about the serum presets is how much time does it take for you to make one commercial serum preset?
One single preset.
Or
Can
I mean not an individual instrument. I mean like because how
oh,
you
like
sit
a
you should
bank of presets?
yes, exactly.
Okay. Uh, Kind of depends. I'll have some patches where it's like it'll that single patch will come together in 30 minutes or an hour, and it sounds great, and I really like the result. Other times I'll be working on a single patch for a couple of days off and on to get the sound really dialed in, or like maybe I'll drop it and come back to it after a couple of weeks even. So it can take a while. I think with cyber guitars and Prime, those are kind of the best examples because they were like big 50 patch preset banks that I did at first. Those took me probably, I want to say around 3 months to get them finished up. And that's including, I'm doing everything on my own. So that's including artwork and mocking up the box and
Oh,
all of that stuff.
I didn't
So
realize I didn't realize you drew everything yourself.
yeah, I handle all of the box art and everything too.
That's very impressive.
Thanks.
I love the Prime cover. Like it's the visor and it's in
Hmm.
space, which is a nice touch.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to roll with make blue kind of like a central motif since the Prime games all deal with phase on, and
I
it
didn't
seems
even get
to
that.
influence the soundtrack quite a bit too. So
Right.
thanks. I'm glad you
And
like it.
of course, and I assume that's the same process that sort of allows you to determine how much of a price should go behind each one. Like I assume the more time it takes, the more you've because like the price on your on the Gumroad is like varies per patch.
I think for preset banks, it's more about what I'm giving to the person who's buying it. Prime and Cyber Guitars all have both, I think, have 50 or more patches each, which is a lot of work. And New Game Plus has slightly less. I think that one has like 30. So I'm trying to do, if you're getting fewer patches, the price is less. And then there are a few that are just wavetable packs. So they're not full on preset banks on their own. They're packs of wavetables that I've custom made that you can use in Serum to make your own patches. Or something that I like to do is load up a preset and then drop in a new random wavetable and see how it affects the sound. And you can get some really cool results that way, especially with basses.
Got it. And that actually leads me into my next question. So how do you go on deciding what kind of serum patch you want to make at any given time? Do you base it off of this sounds really cool and I already have the resources to make it? Do you go in knowing what at least a rough draft of what you need to do, or do you go into it thinking, oh, I am going to learn how to make this on the way just because I really like the subject? Since like did you go into the Metroid one thinking, oh, I already know how to do this, or I can't wait to learn how to do this?
It's a definitely a combination of both. There are, like I said, there are a lot of instruments across that soundtrack where I'll hear it and I'll be like, "Ooh, I really want to recreate that specific patch because I really like how it sounds." And most of the time, I'm kind of just I have a rough idea, a very rough idea of where to start, and I'll um, see where it goes. But I'm often just kind of shooting from the hip and trying things and seeing what works and what doesn't. One of the best examples of this was there's a bass that I made to replicate the second Talon Overworld theme in Metroid Prime. Kind of starts off with this low bass riff that I thought had this really cool character to it. So I really wanted to try and replicate it. And it took a really long time of just messing around and seeing what worked, didn't lots and lots of trial and error. And then other times, on rare occasions, there will be a patch that I'll hear and I'll be like, I really like the sound of that, and I have an idea of exactly how I could make something like that. Um, not definitely not nearly as common as the loads of trial and error approach, but it does happen. Yeah.
Understandable. And I guess what inspired you to turn this specific trial and error business of making serum patches into a business? Like at what point were you like, oh, I'm good enough to sell this? Because at least before you, I didn't know anyone else even sold serum patch presets.
Yeah, there's a bunch of people who are, I mean, Somatics is obviously one of the big ones, but there's tons of people who are selling lots of really cool serum patches out there. Um, I guess I got a lot of small victories over the years with realizing that like, hey, I actually have a real skill with synthesizing stuff here. And it took me a long time to develop, but eventually people were saying that they really liked specific sounds in tracks that I would put out, or say that they really liked a certain bass or a drop or whatever in EDM track. And realizing that there were people who would benefit from me putting this stuff out there was a big driver for it for sure.
Understandable. And the last serum question I'll ask you with, and you've been fantastic at answering all my questions, by the way. I had
Thank you.
last heard, and you probably haven't really had time for it lately, but last I heard you were working on an Armored Core 6 based patch. Is that still in the
hmm
work?
Definitely still in the works. Let me actually pull up the folder and see how many
Ooh.
sounds I have going for it. I think this probably won't be the 50 patch banks just takes so long to put together that they'll probably be a little fewer and farther between, but I do have over 30 on this one already. So you never know. If I find another 20 sounds or I'm able to fill in the gaps with some stuff that isn't necessarily directly inspired from the games, but that sounds enough like something from the soundtrack that I could fit it in there. Um, it could go in there. You never know. We'll see. I still have some work to finish up a bunch of the patches that I already have, but I really like how that one's turning out. I've actually used it in a bunch of stuff, and I was talking about the show that I did some production work for, and I ended up using that bank a lot. So I think it's very usable in a lot of different contexts, and yeah, I'm excited to get that one out to to do a bunch more work with the patches that I have, but um, it is it is coming. It's just a little slow.
All right. Well, I'm very much excited to get my hands on it and do more documentary music.
Thanks. Maybe I'll shoot you a couple patches when we're done here.
Oh, I'd love that.
Yeah,
Um, okay, so but that is all of the questions I had regarding your serum. So the last and most
cool.
important question. Best Metroid Prime game, there is a correct answer.
It's got to be the first one for me. Sorry.
Uh, y- uh, I'm a two. I'm a Prime 2
There's
defender.
there's a lot of people who really like to. I think the last I like it through like the first part of Torvus Bog, but I think there's a lot of dragging that happens in the last half of the game, and there's some bosses that I still just can't figure out. Like if you're just supposed to kind of get hit by them, like the one that comes to mind the most is the big, I think Alpha Blog is what it's called, underwater
Huh?
before you get the gravity suit. And I just have such a hard time dodging, and I always end up dying a few times, and the backtracking to get to the boss room is just brutal.
Oh,
But the first one's got to be it for me. It's just really tight game design, and the soundtrack's amazing.
when I heard you saying X boss kept me from regressing, I was thinking, oh, he's gonna talk about the Spider Ball Guardian or the Boost Ball Guardian.
No, I really don't have much issue with either of those. It's Alpha Block.
Uh, you know, but you didn't even get to Quadraxis, and
No, I beat two. I've
oh,
beaten it a
oh,
handful of times.
okay,
And the end is really cool. I'll give you that too.
okay. At least we agree on that. But
Yeah.
all right. Thank you for answering my more nerdy questions,
Of
and
course,
just thank you for
they're
your time.
important. Yeah,
And
for sure.
all right,
Thanks for the opportunity.
of course, you've been a fantastic uh you've been a fantastic participant. All
Thanks,
right,
man.
I think I will end the recording here. So thank you for your time, and everyone, thank you for listening. See you.
Thanks for having me.